The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of Talk Radio AM 640.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm a Spaceman, and this is AVFS. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around right now listening to AM 640. I welcome you in. Or if you're listening at work, possibly via the AM 640 app, picking up the show there, I welcome you in too. Or if you're listening to me right now on Shaw Direct on channel 865, I welcome you in also. Or if you're listening to me on your 3 or 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, I welcome you in. Or maybe you're what some call best seat in the house to check out A View from Space. Logged on to your Mac, PC at home, on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with what's known as the Masters Golf Tournament, the PGA's kickoff to the golf season. It literally takes over the Illuminati-controlled mass media for 4 days. 4, number of foundation, you see. It's the foundational piece. But more than just in golf, it's in man's spiritual walk, believe it or not. This year, the Masters, as they call it, because to qualify, players need to meet a criteria to receive an invitation to play at the Masters. For instance, former winners of the Masters are eligible. Winners of the last 5 U.S. Opens are eligible, but not necessarily going to be playing unless you receive an invitation. Winners of the last 5 PGA championships, last 5 British Opens, U.S. Opens, as I said, winners of the last 3 Players Championships, winner and runner-up from the last U.S. Amateur Championship even, and the winner of the last British Amateur Championships also included, and the winner of the last Asia-Pacific Amateur Championship included also, could possibly be picked. Also the winner of the United States Mid-Amateur Championship. And the top 12 finishers, including ties from last year's Masters tournament, the 4 top finishers, including ties from last year's U.S. Open, same with the British Open, and the same from last year's PGA Championship, the 4 top finishers, including ties. All eligible to be invited. Oh, and winners of the PGA Tour events that award full FedEx Cup points from the period of the previous Masters to the current Masters. Now, all golfers who qualified for the previous year's Tour Championship also get to qualify, and the top 50 of the final official World Golf Ranking of the previous calendar year are eligible for an invitation, not necessarily to play. The top 50 golfers in the official World Golf Ranking from the week prior to the current Masters is also eligible. And also want to let you know that Augusta National's Masters Committee reserves the right to invite any international golfer it sees fit who's not otherwise qualified. So, just about anybody the Augusta National Masters Committee wants in there is allowed to play. These Masters qualifications usually end up with a tournament field from about 90 to 100 players. So it's the best of the best and then the favorites of the Augusta National Masters Committee, the gatekeepers. Now, with a provision, the gods of golf, whom I just mentioned, may choose any other person they damn well please to be qualified to enter. So that's the power of the elite golf world, which is the sport of business worldwide, golf is. And by that I mean, it's the only sport where multi-million and sometimes multi-billion-dollar deals between corporate heads are begun and are sometimes even consummated, closed. Well, where does that happen quite often? Not just in the boardroom, but on the golf course. But did you know this whole golf tournament called the Masters is not golf's idea, the Masters? No, this is a rite of spring. And it's inspired by, is taken directly from, an ancient satanic high-witching holiday known as the Day of the Masters. It comes from the oldest religion in the world, which is going to be touted as the new religion in the New World Order. Paganism, sun worship, earth worship, sun gods and moon goddesses. Listen, from the old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings which the Illuminati hold as their religion. These are all the corporate heads of the major corporations around the world, which are the movers and shakers of the world, and the ones that are the shareholders, the AAA shareholders, the class AAA shareholders of these companies are the Illuminati, which so strongly influence our world today. And from old Egypt, just like today, the fundamental esoteric occult teachings which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids, the Sphinx, the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. It's the ancient Egyptian mystery religion that I decode every week, right here on Talk Radio, AM 648, say VFS. From her secret doctrine, all nations have borrowed from Egypt. India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece, Rome, and other ancient countries partook literally at the feast of knowledge, which the Hierophants and the masters of the land of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake, be a part of the great store of mystic and occult lore, to become an initiate, which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. The Day of the Masters, it's upon us again. A spring ritual. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed and who seldom have been equaled during the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the days of the great Hermes. In Egypt was located the Great Lodge of Lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temples entered the neophytes, who afterward, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth. This is still going on today, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready, anxious, and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive the same. Just as in the Masters Tournament, for those who are ready to participate and to become a god if they win. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to these venerable masters of that ancient land of Egypt. But among these great masters of ancient Egypt, there was one of whom the masters hailed. They called him Master of the Masters. This man, if it was a man at all, dwelt in Egypt, and in the early days, known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. Do you see now how big the Day of the Masters is, April 8th, every year? The details of his life story are lost to history owing to the lapse of the years through a bunch of the ancient countries disputing with each other in their claims to the honor of having furnished his birthplace. And this thousands and thousands of years ago. The date of his sojourn in Egypt, and that his last incarnation was on this planet, isn't known, but he has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. And the best authorities see him as a contemporary of Abraham. And some of the Jewish traditions go so far back as to claim that Abraham actually acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes Trismegistus himself. This is A View from Space. It's Talk Radio AM 640. And I'm just getting started. I'm the guy to call Space. It's A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Communicate by email only, space at 640toronto.com, one address. The other, spaceman at 640toronto.com. Start rolling in before the show even begins. And thank you so much for the one that you've sent. I really appreciate it. It's the Day of the Masters. Actually, it started yesterday. Actually, it starts the evening before. All witching holidays start on the evening before the actual day. So it would be April 7th, the evening of. More on that in just a few minutes here. It's the Masters Golf Tournament. That's really more than the Masters Golf Tournament. It's really about what I've just talked to you about in the last few minutes. The great Hermes Trismegistus, the master of the masters. And that's basically what the golf tournament is all about. To choose that one through a series of holes or spiritual traps to get through to become the master at the golf tournament and put on that green jacket to be the master of the masters. Hermes Trismegistus. After all, Osiris was the green man. He made things grow. He had the secret of when to plant. Also, the seeds of growing things came from this man. Originally, Cain, who would be the first farmer all time for plants. Hermes Trismegistus, the same information as Cain had, and on it goes, passing through the centuries from that same group of elite bloodline families. Among those great masters of ancient Egypt, the master of the masters, they called him Hermes Trismegistus. As the years rolled by after he died from this plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians deified Hermes, made him one of their gods under the name of Thoth. Years after, the people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of gods, and the thrice great, bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title, Trismegistus, which means the great thrice great, the great. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered the name being synonymous with a fountain of wisdom, of occultic knowledge. Even to this day, we use the word hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed, so that nothing can escape. The Oscars, which is basically a statue of Osiris, a sun god in the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, it's the hermetically sealed envelope that the winner is sealed in. So you get the power of Hermes. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to the teaching, milk for babes, meat for strong men. Both of which maxims are familiar to people of the Christian scriptures, both of whom which had been used in the Egyptians by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era even came along. The satanic ritual holidays and feasts really begin in earnest in the spring in March, the 24th of March. The Day of the Masters is huge as it kicks off an entire 13 days of what's called the Feast of the Beast. Rituals, one after the other, all through April. Actually, it goes through the year. However, the part that I'm concerned with this evening, the Day of the Masters, the spring equinox just covered here a couple of weeks ago. April 1st, the pagan New Year. The Feast of the Beast coming a little later. April 2nd to the 26th, the preparation for sacrifice in the satanic sects. April 8th, the Day of the Masters. April 19, 13 days after the first ritual of the Day of the Masters, is the day of sacrifice to Baal, Moloch. April 19. I want you to remember that date if you can for a little bit, because it is very, very, very significant in this Feast of the Beast that was started on Thursday night of this week, the 7th of April. 8th being the Day of the Masters. 13 days of ritual culminating in the day of the sacrifice to Baal on April 19th. There's something that's going to be happening around the world that is going to get your attention. More on that in minutes on ABFS Talk Radio AM 640. April 24th is St. Mark's Eve. April 26th through to May 1 is Corpus de Baal, they call. April 30th, Beltane, of course, Satanic High Feast of Walpurgisnacht. 8 days of sacrificing. May 1st, May Day, the Satanic New Year's Day. And on May 8th, St. Michael's Day, Lucifer leaves heaven on that day. May 9th, the 11th, and 13th, also feast days called Lumeria in the ancient Roman religion. 3 days, Roman All Souls Day. June 21st, of course, the summer solstice. And it goes right around through to the resurrection of Osiris on October 31st. Then through November, we have, well, Hilaria Mania, the rebirth of Osiris, then the winter solstice, and the year, the occult wheel of the year begins the same cycle again. So spring, the Day of the Masters, April 8th. The entire year, you see, is broken up into precise blocks. Thought about it, and set in stone centuries and centuries ago. The occult calendar is divided into 4 segments of 13 weeks each. It's our Gregorian calendar. The satanic believer believes that numbers contain inherent power. So they literally order our lives by occult numerology. Numerology is also a key component in astrology. Another system of divining that Satanists use to guide them. The number 13, of course, considered divine by the Illuminati for a couple of reasons. They believe 6 to represent the number of man, the number 7 to represent the number of spirit. So an adept climbs that Jacob's ladder to become divine spirit, towards self-perfection in the realm of the occult, which is exactly what the Masters Golf Tournament reflects. This very ritual. So, the occultists signing 6 to represent the number of man, 7 to represent the number of spirit. So as an adept climbs that Jacob's ladder, as it's called in the King James Version of the Bible, toward self-perfection in the realm of the occult, becoming a god, man becoming a god, the number 13 represents the state of divine perfection, self-achieved perfection. Self-achieved, I said. 6 plus 7, the number of man, plus the number of spirit, gives you 13, also known as the number of reincarnation. To reincarnate and come back again in another body. I also call it the cult's mark. They leave their mark on things with a hidden occult 13. Take, for instance, Pope Francis in his 265-page Joy of Love that came out this week. It's just his rules that we've been talking about. I've been talking about on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640 for a while now. Changing the religion closer and closer to fit all religions of the world, and then soon fit paganism. So, the Pope puts out 265 pages of new rules that Catholics are allowed to do. Deals with condoms, deals with divorces that you're before the Roman Catholic Church would not abide. All these rules are being changed. And Pope Francis is looked upon by the world, who is a secular world and not religious at all, as someone who's finally seeing the light, changing it. Well, what he's changing it to is paganism. Slowly but surely, watering it all down. And the hidden 13 is 265 pages of his Joy of Love. Yes, Satanism, Luciferianism, call it what you like. It has ruled for over 7,000 years and more. And by my reckoning and my information, it still is. Space, back with more. It's Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm the guy to call Space. This is A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Communicate by email. Space at 640toronto.com, one address. The other, spaceman at 640toronto.com. And thanks for the one that you've sent. CB writes, greetings, Space. Haven't emailed for a while, but I'm always listening. Just curious on your take on a news item I noticed. Austrian government appropriating the house where Hitler was born. Apparently they don't want it falling into the wrong hands. And whose hands would that be? And why now? Is there a Nazi international still a force to be reckoned with in the world? Anyway, if it makes your agenda tonight, I'm sure I'll be enlightened. By the way, enjoying the Masters. It's that time of year already. All the best. Thanks, Space, for the true story, CB. Occasionally, Hitler does come up, and guess why? His birthday is April 20th, one day after the Feast of the Beast concludes with the sacrifice to Baal. And the reason the Austrians keep bringing it up is you would think a mass murder of that size in the world, you would get rid of everything possible that ever had his name on it, but no, Mein Kampf, still owned by the Austrian government. The house still stands. And, of course, will always still stand. A very important Illuminati member was Adolf Hitler. Really forwarded the agenda by playing the adversary and morphing the world from just a few countries in a thing called the League of Nations at the end of the First World War, which Germany started, and then forming the United Nations out of the League of Nations, 193 countries now under its umbrella, under its power. That's the global New World Order government, but it hasn't been plugged in yet. There's no power yet. It has no binding powers. But soon, that will be revamped, of course, but the United Nations of the world is the global power. So Satanism and Luciferianism ruled for over 7,000 years and many more. It is still going on, hidden in plain sight. Like the Masters Golf Tournament, as I explained here tonight. Ancient dates of importance, especially from the pagan world, are revered. The Illuminati believe that esoteric or occult knowledge is in itself neutral, you know. It is the mind, and thus the energy called upon that determines what the outcome will be. As negative as many of the energies existent upon planes outside the third dimension, there is equal balanced and benevolent energies waiting to be called upon with far more power, tapping into the occult spirits, the demonic world, the spirit world. The reason this earth is imbalanced to the negative, the Illuminati believe, is because most people who utilize energy do it in the quest for personal wealth and power, something the balanced energies do not offer. The Illuminati believe that such spiritual power is the consequence of enrichment of one's soul, but done in a balanced way, benefiting all and not the self or egotistic aspect of man, what the Aboriginals call working with the earth, as opposed to calling on energies outside the earth for personal power to lord over others, from where the sickness of civilization is supposedly coming from. The whole of what we call civilization and culture is controlled by keeping man's energies focused to the three lower chakras beneath the heart. The root chakra, Judaism. The sacral chakra, Islam. And Christianity. The solar plexus chakra, the trinity of total imbalance, made so because these three are below the heart chakra, therefore canceling out love. And as the energy travels up the chakra system, it is imbalanced, so the human cannot utilize the upper chakras. Man is fixed in the underworld. The fall of man. Easter, the feast of Priapus, festival of Isis, falls on or very near April 1st. The day of Ishtar, New Year's Day for the Assyrians, by the way. April 8th, just yesterday, the Day of the Masters, a day for sacrifice in satanic sects. It's a day for sacrifice to Baal, Moloch. An ancient ritual took place in the evening before the Day of the Masters in the ancient times. It still goes today. These rituals are still being held by our elite rich. I'd love to follow some big names to see what they would be doing on the evening of April 7th going into April 8th. There are a few other dates in the year, too, that would be very interesting to trace the movements of some of these masters of the masters that run our world. The goddess Ishtar slept with the Assyrian king on New Year's Day in her castle, in her palace she called the White House, because it was white, made of white rock. And yes, that's exactly the same name as the president's home in the United States of America is called the White House. The goddess Ishtar, Isis, sleeps with the Assyrian king, and if she approves of him, king for another year. But if she disapproved of his tryst in the sack, on that New Year's Eve he was killed, and a new king would be picked. Sometimes Ishtar, Isis, would become pregnant in these ritualistic trysts with the king in her bedroom, and this became the foundation of the bloodline for all the Roman emperors that followed in history. This was the doorway by which all of the masters of the world would descend from. Yes, if you're anyone in the world today in the 21st century, you can trace your lineage back to one of the great family members of the goddess Ishtar, the goddess Isis, same name, different name, same entity that slept with the kings of Assyria originally. Those children became the bloodlines of all of the Roman emperors that followed. It was the day of the Masters. The Masters tournament in golf begins April 7th this year, and it doesn't always fall exactly on the beginning of the 13 days of the satanic beast of the feast ritual, as it's called, with the 8th of April being Masters Day. But this year, it does. The day of the Masters was the date chosen by the Illuminati to bury Pope John Paul II, if you'll recall. Attending that funeral on the day of the Masters, April 8th, 4 kings, 3 queens present in the audience, 200 heads of state attending. Talk about day of the Masters gathering. What's especially interesting about that funeral of Pope John Paul II, about that funeral, who's now a saint, by the way, is that the Italian press had to lie of when the Pope actually died. Listen, it's quite interesting. The day of the Masters, the funeral had to fall on that day, the 8th of April. And what's especially about this funeral is that the Italian press declared the Pope dead on April 1st, but the Vatican quickly denied this. They insisted he did not die until the next day, April 2nd. So you see, there was a reason the Catholic Church denied the death on April 1st. And here it is. Canon law states that the Pope must be buried between the 4th and 6th day after his death. If he died on April 1st, for example, then, he would have had to have been buried by the 7th at the latest. Would have missed Master's Day. But if he died on the 2nd of April, which the Vatican changed it to, because the Italian press declared him dead on April 1st, the Vatican denied it, said he died April 2nd, so that he could be buried on April 8th, the day of the Masters. Remember, the Catholic Church was founded with the approval of the Roman emperors, whose descendants are traced back to the day of the Masters and those trysts on New Year's Eve with Isis, Ishtar, and the king of Assyria. The Mass at St. Peter's Basilica for that funeral, Pope John Paul II was the first Mass of Requiem for a Pope to be televised live in almost every nation in the world. Now you can see why they had to move the death date to get the maximum effect in the numerology and the spirituality of Master's Day. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, now Pope Benedict XVI Emeritus, led the Mass, and Ratzinger was also the man who ran Pope John Paul's entire papacy. Did you know that? And he replaced him. This tournament, the Masters Tournament of Golf, is highly prestigious, as you can now see. It's scheduled for the first full week of April, and it's the first of the majors to be played every year. Unlike major championships, the Masters is always held in the same location. I'm back with more on the Masters and more on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm Space. It's a view from space. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com. Space at 640toronto.com. Another location for you to load up my inbox, and they start rolling in before the show even begins. S writes, loving the show. Interesting numerology on this bit of news, and the name of the horse, of course. Rule the World. Name of the horse. Its trainer also won this year's Irish Grand National with a horse called Rogue Angel. Yes, Rule the World has just won, earlier today, the 2016 Grand National. The Horse and Hound. That's the first-time jockey aboard that horse, too, winning the Krabby's Grand National. Aboard a horse, having his first win over fences for his Irish trainer. Yes, April 9th is the date today, 2016, my emailer writes. 2016, the year. 2016 breaks down to a 9. April 9th. A 9-year-old gelding wins the race. Purchased for £90,000. How about that? Rule the World wins the 2016 Grand National. Earlier today. Yes, numerology figures so greatly in the sport of kings and in our world today because of who our gods are, the Illuminati. So the Masters Tournament, held in one place, one location, all the time, never changes. The Augusta National Golf Club, the private club in the city of Augusta, Georgia, United States. The course itself, each of the 18 holes, is man's metaphorical quest to become a god. 18. Another 9 here, as my emailer was pointing out. So many at this time of year. The Masters, the day of the Masters. Each of the 18 holes, man's metaphorical quest to become a god. Each hole has a treacherous pitfall by which this progress to perfection can be interrupted. And at the end, there's always someone who joins the elite ruling class of gods and is accepted and dons the green jacket, Satan's favorite color, as he hid in the foliage of the Garden of Eden to beguile Eve. Yes, there were also on the par 3 trial, as that tournament got underway earlier this week, 9 holes in one, which caught everyone by surprise, and caught everyone's ear, too, and, well, instant attention was paid to the Masters. What? Hole in one? No, not one. 9 in one day. Which really lends credence to my belief, my theory that all sports are fixed and golf, there are magnets in the hole to propel your ball away from the hole or to pull it inward. Oh, you see some incredible shots. Guys, how they read the green. The masters are at work. And there's the word again, on the green. Again, evoking Osiris, the green man. Hermes Trismegistus. Yes, there are a few dates on the Illuminati satanic calendar that will be followed for the basis of the next few weeks, designed to instill fear in us all, to control this level of conscious that we're in, that we're governed by. So many times it's happened. Blood sacrifices at this time. As I've said at the outset, April 26th right through to May 1st is Corpus Deval. April 30th, Beltane's Satanic High Feast of Walpurgisnacht, culminating on May Day. Also this time frame, St. Michael's Day, Lucifer leaving heaven marked on that day. And Lumeria, 3 days, where the Romans celebrate All Souls Day. And then comes the summer solstice, high point of the sun cycle, Sirius rising, and then Lammas, the harvest, feast day to Hecate, Mania, opening of the netherworld then, the gate of Osiris' birthday, feast of Nephthys, wife of Set, goddess of death, day of sacrifice to Hecate, the marriage to Satan, the feast of the beast. All of these fall between April 26th and May 1st, the return of light. So you can expect a very, very scary ride. This year, the Festival of the Beast ritual took place on the eve of April 8th, that being the 7th, as I talked about earlier in the show. In the occult world of witchcraft, the ritual always commences, as I said, on the evening leading into the day of the event. That being last night, Friday night, the evening of the 7th, Thursday, and to evoke even greater potency from this event this year, last night, on the day of the Masters, had a new moon form in the sky, which is the closest the moon will be in proximity to Earth all of this year. In other words, maximum power from the moon goddess, who has just taken over since the spring equinox has passed, and the woman rules for 6 months. Now, remember I said at the beginning of the show, almost an hour ago, April 19th, remember that date, because it's very significant of something that's going to be happening in the world, all around the world, that will get your attention. And it is just this. Visitors next month to Times Square in New York City, or in London, are in for a culture shock. A life-size reproduction of the temple of, well, the god who I'm talking about this evening, Baal. Needless to say, the exhibition of a symbol of paganism that is the centerpiece of all child sacrifice and ritual prostitution, well known to people who study the Bible, has raised a few people's eyebrows, and some are very concerned, and some are very upset, and the rest of the people in the world don't even have any idea what is meant by the Temple of Baal being erected in 2 of the global cities, London and New York, by April 19th, which is the day of sacrifice, child sacrifice to Moloch, Baal. The display, though, is part of World Heritage Week, we're told by the Illuminati-controlled mass media, or will be, and is meant by organizers from the Institute of Digital Archaeology as a statement of defiance against ISIS, the Islamic terror group that destroyed the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, August 2015. Well, the whole temple is not destroyed. Believe me, it isn't. It is still partially standing. But this is supposedly the Institute of the Digital Archaeology that has actually said that we're going to stand up against ISIS and put this temple up in many cities around the world just to show them. No, you're not. You're using it as an excuse to bring the Temple of Baal and place it in many hundreds of cities around the world, beginning with two of the greatest global cities in the world, New York City and London. The original structure of Temple of Baal, dedicated to the god of Baal, in 32 AD, approximately the time of the crucifixion of Jesus, just slightly after, stood for nearly 2,000 years before ISIS leveled the site with many others. Prior to the current war in Syria, the ancient site had over 150,000 visitors a year. This temple in Palmyra is a big deal for the Illuminati because it is the god Baal, whom they worship. Believe it or not, the leaders of your world are pagan. Space, back with more to prove it on Talk Radio, AM 640, next. I'm the guy that calls Space. It's View from Space on Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space640toronto.com. Now, let me call him E. Good show as always. Question: what do you think is the real reason that Tiger Woods was brought so low in the scandal of several years back? Did he have too much hubris? Did he displease his overlords of the Illuminati? I've wondered about this over the years. Signed, E. I'll tell you right now, the reason why he was brought down, chastised, never win another Masters tournament again, ever. Because I believe Tiger Woods was caught using steroids, and they could not possibly ever put an asterisk in the pristine world of golf in their records. So they told him, you can play, but you will never win again. And of course, once he was off the steroids, there was no game. And that's what I believe happened with the takedown of Tiger Woods. The pristine world of golf severely chastised him in public, and rarely do that to anyone. But when you set all of the records and cheat doing it so that they would have to put in asterisks, as in Major League Baseball today, to taint the sport, the pristine world of golf will have none of it. And that's what I believe happened. And I'll never be able to prove it except for if you trace Dr. Galea and Tiger Woods. He was treating Tiger Woods for a time with his back problems. And I believe he was giving him steroids. That's how it was being done. And possibly the country of Canada here, where the show emanates from, possibly being involved in that. So, I hope that answers your question, or gives you a little insight to what you might be that you may think might have gone on. But he will never win again. And very close to Arnold Palmer's records, which will never be touched. Too pristine. So, the Temple of Baal, coming by April 19th, just in time for the blood sacrifice of Moloch Baal on April 19th, the culmination of this Feast of the Beast, is coming to New York City's Times Square and Trafalgar Square in London, and then to many other cities around the world. It's being done with 3D printing. Using a database of thousands of images, the Institute for Digital Archaeology is creating this full-sized, 50-foot-tall 3D printed replica of the entrance arch to the temple. These demonic arches are going to be put up all around the world. The excuse being, we want to show ISIS that they can't destroy things. So we're going to put them up in all hundreds of cities around the world. No, you want to worship your God in the open. And here's an excuse to get it done. By the way, all the work is going to be done in China. Yeah, made in China. And only the replica of the arch is going to be displayed. The Bible's Old Testament frequently condemns the worship of false gods, along with Baal, which, by the way, means Lord, and he's most often singled out. Baal was the cruelest. Baal worship, common in the biblical Levant, spread across the Mediterranean, becoming dominant in North Africa's Carthage, where archaeologists have excavated extensive cemeteries with remains of many hundreds of sacrificed children. The name of the famous leader, Hannibal, is made up part of the name of Baal. Hannibal. Most people not familiar with the workings of witchcraft don't understand who this god Baal was, nor do they really care. But now it's going to be front and center in their face. But the truth is, paganism's sun worship, earth worship, is the religion of the elites who are our gods here on earth, and what's more, is many of the elements of this ancient religion of ancient Baal worship are being mirrored by them in our society right now, today, here in 2016. The temple's even being erected, at least the pillars are. The arch. So, considering the child, and the arch, by the way, is the doorway, is it not? This is going to open the door to a whole new level of fear in the world. Because that's what the Temple of Baal was to the ancient world. So here in 2016, Baal worship is being mirrored in our society. How? Well, you consider the child sacrifices front and center with Baal worship and sexual immorality that we're engaged in today. Maybe it is only natural for us to be able to accept it now without batting an eye, even having a temple of Baal in Times Square and in Trafalgar Square in London. So, if you're unaware, or one of those people that didn't care before, possibly a first-time listener to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640, here are some of the elements of Baal worship. The principal pillars of Baalism were child sacrifice and sexual immorality, both heterosexual and homosexual, and pantheism, reverence of creation over the Creator. In other words, worshiping the creation, but not the Creator. Ritualistic Baal worship, when it's all said and done, looks exactly like this. Adults gathering around the altar of Baal. Infants, children, would then be burned alive as a sacrificial offering to Baal. Amid horrific screams and the stench of charred human flesh, men and women alike, as this was going on, would engage in sexual orgies, man on man, women on women, women on women, men on men, man on woman, man on child. The ritual of convenience intended to produce economic prosperity, they believed, by prompting Baal to bring rain for the fertility of Mother Earth. The natural consequences of this kind of behavior, pregnancy, and then childbirth, and the associated financial burdens of unplanned parenthood in our world today, were easily offset. You could either choose to engage in homosexual conduct, or, with child sacrifice available on demand, you could simply take part in another fertility ceremony to terminate the unwanted child. We call it abortion today. The Illuminati are signaling a shift with this bold, out-in-the-open display and bringing the Temple of Baal to London and New York City by the 19th of this month. The Illuminati believe that here, now, in 2016, we have now become a world that does not want God, does not want the Bible, and most importantly, has locked His Son, Jesus Christ, outside the doors of the professing Christian church. We're now in the process of demonizing the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and of uplifting earth and sun worship. Just think for a moment. Solar power being pushed, climate change being pushed, and environmental fanaticism taken over, all in the name of saving the planet. We've become greedy, selfie-centered, powerless wanderers, not truly understanding the direction in which we're being led by our crazed overlords who are making all of our decisions for us on the direction and devolvement and not evolvement of our world. Many are saying that recreating the Temple of Baal in New York City and in London will indeed open a portal to sinister forces, that the planets will be aligned in such a way that during that time as to portend some very dark things. It's a Spaceman. More next on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the guy to call Space. It's Talk Radio AM 640. You can email me. Two locations, spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. J.A. writes, loyal listener, mention the growth of paganism. Check this out. I just did a little word search on the internet. According to surveys, Wicca is shortly becoming the fastest growing religion in the USA and the UK in a few years, and will become the third largest religious group. Best wishes, J.A. Oh, it's already a foregone conclusion that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are trouble. And now, climate change, solar power, it's all about. Yes, it's all about Mother Earth and Father Son. Yeah, the natural consequence of us turning a blind eye, not caring, or being disinterested, or someone that isn't going to say that's wrong. In this world of political correctness, it takes a real person to stand up these days for what they believe, because they want you to bow down to that politically correct mob and accept anything and everything they please, which is anything goes. Do what thou willst. The whole law. Do whatever you want. If it's not right for you, it might be okay for someone else, so don't bother them about it. Political correctness The natural consequence of that kind of behavior is to lose everything you have. All of your morality. Because the Illuminati believe that here now in 2016 we have become a world that does not want rules. Oh, we want fairness. We want justice. But we're willing to knuckle under and allow our leaders to show us what we have to have for our own good. And we accept it. Not enough will stand up and say, no, we don't accept it. We don't want to belong to a greedy, self-centered, powerless bunch of wanderers on this earth that are doing paganistic, ritualistic things throughout the wheel of the year. So the Temple of Baal is coming to New York and London. And it will open a portal, believe me, to sinister forces. You see, the truth is, modern liberalism deviates little, very little, from its ancient predecessor. While its macabre rituals have been sanitized with a little flowery, euphemistic kind of vision in art, its core tenets, its beliefs, its practices are all based in occult teachings that are satanic. The worship of fertility has been replaced with the worship of reproductive freedom or choice. Child sacrifice via burnt offering has been updated, ever so slightly, to become child sacrifice by the way of abortion. The ritualistic promotion, practice, and celebration of both heterosexual, homosexual lifestyles, promiscuity, have been carefully whitewashed, yet wholeheartedly embraced by the cults of radical feminism, militant gay rights, comprehensive sex education. The pantheistic worship of Mother Earth has been established. Radical environmentalism has been established. And what it really is earth and sun worship, goddess and god worship. I mentioned this just in passing a few weeks ago on AVFS, Talk Radio, AM 640. It's the fact that the reproductions of the 50 arches, or the 50-foot arch that stood at the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, would be erected in New York City and London and will only be the first of many. London and New York are only the first cities to receive the replica of the Palmyra, Syria Temple of Baal arches, the portals to open. The Illuminati have planned additional locations around the world to follow in lockstep and erect the replicas of the same Temple of Baal in their city centers. The Illuminati only think global, which is their target, to take the globe and make it one. The plan is to put the replica Baal temple arches in hundreds more cities all over the globe. The organization behind this, as I mentioned, the Institute of Digital Archaeology, which is a joint venture between Harvard University, the University of Oxford, and Dubai's Museum of the Future. A replica of the original arches from the Temple of Baal, which is still standing in Palmyra, Syria, by the way, did not get destroyed by ISIS. That'll be erected in New York and London, and later hundreds, as I said, of other cities around the world, up by April 19th, as touted as being a gesture of defiance against ISIS. But ultimately, the plan is to share this cultural treasure with as many cities around the planet as possible. In other words, to introduce you to the old gods, which are going to be your new gods. So says the Illuminati-controlled mass media. But the real truth is the elites believe this gesture, this show, of an open display of worship of Baal by the citizens of the world will please Lucifer, their god of light, so much that he will be coaxed into entering the coming Antichrist, and that we're ready for him and want him to come, the future man of perdition. As the King James Version of the Bible clearly states and claims the world to belong to Lucifer. Now, if you travel to New York City or London, you're not going to be able to miss these giant arches, because they are going to dominate the centers of Times Square and Trafalgar Square in London. The life-size model of the original 2,000-year-old structure, known as the Arch of the Temple of Baal, 48 feet high, 23 feet wide. Yeah, you'll notice it all right. The Illuminati-controlled mass media will be shooting pictures of this all year around the world. Again, supposedly, all part of a World Heritage Week event. The temple replicas go up in Times Square, Trafalgar Square, will be made in China, a city that will be part of the hundreds of other cities around the world that will have been chosen by the Institute of Digital Archaeology to receive these arches. They're the ones named as the head of the project. Here's a bit of knowledge that's connected to the worship of Baal. First of all, it's known that there are, or were, usually great crowds of people gathered to participate in the spectacle, this ritual itself. It will always be centered on a high hill in the ancient times, like a theater or a stadium. That's where the crowds watched and even participated in public sex. It's really nothing new to the 21st century man, really, though, is it? Who now routinely does this ritual? Well, yes, he does. It's exactly the same ritual many millions do today around the world, watching others have sex. But only we do it in the privacy of our own home, in movies and television. But we routinely sit around and watch others have sex. In ancient times, the whole community came out, and all the best pagan ideas for success in crops and fertility were promoted, just like a business seminar that promotes ideas that justify the worldliness of the origin of the earth and the sun worship today. So the Illuminati think you're now ready. The world is now ready to accept Baal worship, and will say nothing when they erect the Baal temple right in front of you in broad daylight for you will all see in your city's centers. To see this and to say yes. But to really comprehend the meaning and the intent by these elites, I don't think people would be that, well, welcoming. If they really knew and could comprehend the meaning and intent by the elites to put this Arch of Baal in hundreds of cities around the world. We're so used to the acceptance of strange pagan symbols and beliefs because, well, personalities, promoters, performers, Hollywood stars, whom we respect and admire, and yes, idolize, are even given the platform to flaunt these ancient religious symbols in front of you. The rock stars, the Hollywood stars do it all the time. I point it out all the time here on AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640. Some of them are great dancers too, like, well, you can't believe that they're actually followers of Baal and have those types of symbols with them on the stage. But yes, they do. I'm Space, back with more after this. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a View from Space and Talk Radio AM 640. You can email me at spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one that you sent. I really appreciate it. I really do. I want to get to this. We're so used to the acceptance of strange pagan symbols and beliefs because, well, it's all over our entertainment packages all the time. I point it out all the time here on the show. And back in Hitler's day, when he did those occult oratory shows that he put on, they were shows. They had people just flaming in love with that man. Of the way he talked to them? No. The symbols that were around and the words that he chose. People were so familiar with the Nordic religion at this time, at that juncture in German history, that it was all very familiar to them what he was preaching. Because it was the new occult that they were learning, the Nordic, giving up Christianity, giving up Judaism, and moving toward the Norse mythology, which is what Hitler, brought up by the Thule Society, harnessed the German people with to get them to fight. I tell you now, I believe the same ritual is readying this world to fight the Third World War, using the same modus operandi, putting the symbolism in place, talking the talk on daily news items, pitting Christianity and Judaism against Islam, to bring about the New World Order, to change religion completely, to change the world completely, to change borders completely. We're so used to the acceptance of strange pagan symbols now, and the beliefs come with it, and won't take long to be adopted by the people. In ancient times, people danced around the Asherah pole, which was nothing more than a phallic symbol. It's quite possible that these poles functioned somewhat like the poles of what we are calling the gentlemen's clubs today. People also acted out lustful, licentious body scenes for the enjoyment of all who came to watch. They all had different kinds of sexual experiences on display, including men with women, men with men, women with women, transsexuals with men, women with transsexuals, the old with the young. And today, all of those combinations I just mentioned are totally accepted in movies, sitcoms, or even in the daily diet of the news cycle. The most important of the worship of Baal, of course, information that all researchers on this subject will tell you, is that the centerpiece for Baal worship was child sacrifice, and is the central feature of Baal worship. There were two places in particular that were used in ancient times for this slaughter, known as the Valley of the Slaughter. The Valley of the Son of Hinnom and Tophet were two places. You have no idea where these places are, do you? Once called the Valley of the Son of Hinnom, possibly naming the original owner to get its name, the Valley of Hinnom is a deep ravine west and south of Jerusalem. And today it's known as Wadi Jahannam or Wadi Erubet, believed to be located in the southwest region of the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. Topheth occupied a high place there and was the site of worship of the Ammonite god Moloch or Baal. Now, Initiated by his love of foreign women as wives and concubines, King Solomon in his day established shrines for the worship of pagan gods about high places or hilltops. Two pagan gods were in particular very detestable: Chemosh, the pagan god of the Moabites, and Moloch, Baal, the pagan god of the Ammonites, because their worship called for the sacrifice of infants. Tophet, meaning place of fire, was a site of worship for Moloch, Baal, but its primitive root word toph meant playing or beating a percussion instrument such as a timbrel, a tambourine, or a drum. Researchers believe that it was possible that percussion instruments were used to drown out the sounds of the infants as they were being burned alive. And of course, they translated also into the beats to call, summon each individual demonic entity that they would want to bring into their midst. Say the right name, say the right beat, get the right spirit. Moloch had the head of a bull with two horns, the body of a man. Baal, the idol's stomach was hollow, and it was the furnace for the fire used during the sacrifice. When the whole which you would call the death chamber, which was actually the statue of Moloch, was really red hot, then it was used as the sacrifice spot. The infant was placed into the arms that were held out by the statue. And of course, the drums would beat ever so loudly. People would be worked up into a frenzy as child after child was set on this smoking hot piece of metal called Baal. Baal, Moloch, had the head of a bull with two horns, the body of a man, and his stomach, as I said, hollow. That was the furnace for the fire used in the sacrifice. It's not known exactly when in history the Israelites started sacrificing their children, but God of the Bible, King James Word of the Bible, clearly prohibited such forms of worship and indicated that sacrificing innocent children was murder or blood on their hands. And infanticide began with idolatry. Infanticide is murdering children. Biblical evidence actually prohibited the worship of Moloch or its practices, and there is proof of that. And the King James Version of the Bible actually states that King Ahaz of Judah, the 12th king from Solomon, sacrificed, that's Solomon's bloodline, sacrificed his own sons to Baal in his attempt to seek military aid from the pagan god himself. That's written in 2 Kings, chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. More on the temple of Baal in Tophet and the valley of the son of Hinnom when I return on Talk Radio AM 640. It's the Spaceman. More next. I'm the guy to call Space. Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one that you've sent. I really and truly appreciate it. As I said, we're so used to the acceptance of pagan symbology now because of the entertainment diet that we ingest nightly, daily, all day long. Some people staring at those screens. So, the central places for child worship to Baal, the child sacrifice and worship to Baal, whereas that the ancient place of Tophet and the valley of the son of Hinnom, known as the Valley of Slaughter, as I said earlier. And King Azaz of Judah, the 12th king from King Solomon, sacrificed his own sons in an attempt to get military help from Baal. King Manasseh of Judah, the 14th king from King Solomon, also an evil king, like King Ahaz. King Manasseh sacrificed his own sons by burning them to death in the worship of Baal, setting them on the arms of a smoking hot statue, with the drums beating so loudly as to wipe out the cries of the children being scorched to death. King Josiah of Judah, the 16th king from King Solomon, changed all things. In his reforms, he abolished all idol worship. He abolished pagan priests, destroyed pagan shrines, and specifically destroyed Tophet. By spreading human bones about, King Josiah deified the former high places of idol worship and rendered them ceremonially unclean. But it's not known if King Josiah was entirely successful, as Jeremiah makes repeated calls against Tophet. But in time, the valley of the son of Hinnom became a garbage dump for the city of Jerusalem, taking in all of its waste, its garbage, unclean objects, such as the bodies of dead animals and executed criminals. Fires within the dump promoted to reduce the garbage that was collected there. So even today, it's still playing the same role, sort of. A full-fledged garbage dump, with its wretched, rotting aromas, howls of scavenging wild birds and animals, smoldering chunks of garbage, and perpetual fires. In Hebrew, the valley of Hinnom is called Gehinnom, which is translated into Greek, and it became Gehenna because of its history of infant sacrifice and idol worship. The area was associated with desecration, abominable fires, death, and waste. The concept of hell is born out of 4 words. Gehenna is one of them. Sheol is another. And Hades, the other. Tartarus. The concept of hell. I should think so. And the arches to the gateway to hell are coming to a city near you, or your very city, as the Illuminati are going to erect the arches of Baal, of the ancient Baal temple in Palmyra, Syria, in hundreds of cities around the world, starting with New York City, Times Square, London, Trafalgar Square, by April 19th. Are the people of the world ready for it? Yes, they are. The Illuminati believe you are. Just like ancient Baal worshippers, they see you now as a society that is addicted to watching other people having sex. In fact, they got you addicted with their product. In fact, 68% of all men watch pornography on a daily basis. And just like ancient Baal worshippers, we're a society that's engaged in child sacrifice. Oh, admit it or not, I've got many, what most believe to be just accidents involving the deaths of many children by fire at this exact time of year before the moratorium of the dance around the maypole on May 1st ends this blood sacrifice season. No wonder the children are happy dancing around the maypole, right? They've escaped the ritual of being a victim in a child sacrifice. But today, we have another occulted cover for this bloodthirsty ritual involving killing children, infanticide. It's called abortion. But the motives are still the same. If an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy comes along, we have a mechanism for getting rid of it, just like the ancients did. Many people see America as modern-day Babylon, and now the Illuminati are going to have a monument that directly links America to ancient Babylon, right in the heart of the most important city in North America, New York City. Since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973 by the Supreme Court of the United States of America, there have been more than 58 million children aborted. I'm not lying about the number. 58 million people have been aborted, denied life through abortion. I'm willing to bet even the ancient Baal worshippers never got that much blood on their hands. Allow me to give you a little insight on some absolutely astounding additional information of the worship of Baal. As it turns out that the exact day when the reproductions of the arch that stood in the front of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, is going to be erected in Times Square, New York, Trafalgar Square in London, on the exact day when a very important occult festival related to that worship of Baal begins. Remember the Day of the Masters, here, now, in which the ritual of the Feast of the Beast begins. Began this past Thursday of this week that's just gone by, the 7th, because it's always celebrated on the eve before the day of, which is April 8th, Masters Day. That being yesterday, Friday, the Day of the Masters. Precisely 13 days after this ritual begins is the worship of the god Baal and the sacrifice day. That is April 19th. That's the very same date that has been chosen for the Temple of Baal to be erected in both the great global cities of the earth, New York City and London, England. April 19, the first day of a 13-day, the last day, rather, of a 13-day period, known as the Feast of the Beast. It leads up to the blood sacrifice of the beast that culminates in this high occult holy day of Beltane on May 1st, when it all concludes. There's no more blood sacrifices. In some parts of the world, Beltane, much better known as May Day, May 1st, has been described as the Illuminati's second most sacred holiday. Have we witnessed incidences of ritual blood sacrifices involving children in the past during the second half of April? The answer to that question is an emphatic yes, and I've covered them every time they've happened. To a few of us, we've noticed, but to many, it's gone unnoticed. I tell you, there is a definite connection. April 19th, the feast of the blood sacrifice to Baal, Moloch, another name used. If you're not familiar with Moloch or Baal, an ancient Canaanite god that's repeatedly denounced in the Old Testament of the King James Version of the Bible. Child sacrifice, a key feature of the worship. I'm the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more on this. It continues. Next. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thank you so much for the one that you've sent. I really appreciate it. I really do. You got a critique of the show, or you'd like to pass me along some information, or you'd just like to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS from on Talk Radio AM 640, feel free to use either one of those addresses. April 19th. Blood Sacrifice Day for Baal. And is it just a coincidence that reproductions of the arch that stood in front of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, are going up in New York and London on the precise day when the Feast of Moloch is celebrated and when the blood sacrifice to the beast begins? The organization in charge of this cultural project, as they call it, is the Institute of Digital Archaeology. Here's what their website states. On April 19th, 2016, in cooperation with national and international cultural heritage preservation organizations, and in conjunction with World Heritage Week 2016, the Institute for Digital Archaeology will install a monumental scale reconstruction of Palmyra's triumphal arch on Trafalgar Square and in Times Square. Through this project and others like it, scheduled through 2016 in cities both inside and outside the Middle East, the Institute for Digital Archaeology seeks to provide an optimistic and constructive response to the ongoing threats to history and heritage that have captured headlines over the past year. Our aim is to highlight the potential for the triumph of human ingenuity over violence by offering innovative, technology-driven options for the stewardship of objects and architecture from our shared past. Do you actually believe that this date was chosen at random? And preserving ancient cultures? Think again. It's not just some sort of freak weird accident that the date that you decided on is a 13-day period at the time of the Feast of the Beast. The significant worship of Baal's child sacrifice, April 19th through May 1st. The 13-day period with fire sacrifice required on April 19th. You don't think that was a coincidence, do you? The fire god is known by a few names. Nimrod, Moloch, Baal. The sun god is also known as the Roman god Saturn, Satan, the devil. This is a major human sacrifice day, April 19th, demanding fire sacrifice with an emphasis on children as the victims. This day is one of the most important human sacrifice days and the second most important Illuminati holiday. And here are some very important historic events that occurred on April 19th. 1993, Waco Massacre. FBI assault leads to the burning down of a compound of a sect named the Branch Davidians, killing 76 women, men, and children. April 19th, 1995, Oklahoma City bombing. 168 people killed. One of them was a nursery. A daycare center. 1999, Columbine, high school massacre. 13 people murdered. Children, kids. Virginia Tech massacre. 32 killed. Kids. Boston Marathon explosion. 3 killed. Also, don't forget that Tamerlan Tsarnaev, linked to the Boston Marathon bombing ritual, was shot to death April 19th. Oh, and one more thing. That since 2016 is a leap year, April 20th will be the 11th day of the year. And triple numbers are considered to be power dates in the occult world. April 20th, by the way, also Hitler's birthday. This 13-day period, which begins April 19th, culminates with the high occult holy day of Beltane on May 1st. And in recent years, this occult holiday has experienced a tremendous resurgence, especially in Europe. The origin of Beltane can be traced all the way back to the worship of Baal in the ancient Middle East. This is why it's becoming so popular. It's being made that way by the Illuminati-controlled mass media. Beltane begins April 30th, sundown. Lasts until sunrise on May 1st. We got some rough times ahead, believe me. With these rituals coming up, Beltane is the opposite of Halloween on the satanic calendar. As Halloween is a time of reaping, Beltane is a time of rebirth, planning. This holiday is a time to celebrate fertility, indulgence, the rebirth of spring, the Sumerian god Enlil, Baal. This is where the name Beltane originates. Baal, the Sumerian god Enlil. Before any real celebrating took place, wood from 9 different types of trees gathered in sacred grid was made. The grid was created by drawing a square on the ground, dividing it into 8 smaller squares. Turf from the 8 outer squares dug out, leaving the 9th square intact. The Beltane fire symbolized the central hearth of the community, the divine fire in the center of all things, and the spark of life within mankind. Beltane celebrations, you see, were celebrated in the nude and without shame. Celebrants would dance around the maypole, which stood as a phallic symbol. Couples would pair up, jump through the bonfire, and had sex in the woods all night after intense feasting. Were you aware that this very ancient worship of Baal can be traced all the way back to one of the very first kings of Babylon, that is known as, in Sumerian sources, as Enmerkar, named as Nimrod in the King James Version of the Bible? He was the one to establish the very first New World Order in the ancient world, and he fundamentally changed the course of human history. After Nimrod died, this ancient king of Babylon eventually came to be worshipped as a sun god under a whole host of different names: Marduk, Osiris, Apollo, many, many, many more. All of the Illuminati's secret societal groups and pagan cults believe that someday, sometime, this ancient deity will be resurrected and will once again take his place as the ruler of the world. And many researchers are entirely convinced that there is some sort of a connection between the ancient figure of Nimrod and the future coming Antichrist. So if you've been skeptical of tonight's focus on this Feast of the Beast, as it's known by the Illuminati, it's just mere coincidence. Do you really think it is? Do you now think that they are erecting arches for this ancient deity in New York and London on a date that is exceedingly significant for those that worship Baal? Don't you think it's conceivable? Don't you think it's possible that there is more to these gateways than are being constructed than we're being told? Could it be possible that we're laying out giant welcome signs for the Antichrist? Spaceman, back with more. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. I really appreciate it. I really do. I thank you so much for that. So if you think that what you've been hearing tonight on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640, is a bit strange, well, the truth is, you haven't seen anything yet. From this point on, after the portal to Baal has been opened in plain view for all to see, things are going to get much, much stranger. Ultimately, the world that we live in is going to come to resemble something out of a post-apocalyptic science fiction novel. So enjoy the remaining days of, well, what we would call normal life today, as we've all come to know it. Our world is rapidly changing, and those changes are soon going to become extremely dramatic. I believe it was Benjamin Disraeli, the very first Prime Minister of England, who knew a thing or two about power, said, "The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those not behind the scenes." What is meant by that? That there are totally different people running the world than you believe, and you don't even know their names. I do talk about them on the show all the time, and know the plan. What is called the 13th Illuminati bloodline is also known as the Merovingian or the Atlantean bloodline. The ones that have been handed that occult, very occult knowledge all the way back from Hermes Trismegistus. It's considered the purest satanic lineage of all, from Cain right up to the coming Antichrist. The descendants of this most ancient bloodline have given birth to some of the most infamous occult fraternities in the world, too, like the Celtic Druids, witchcraft, Tamar, mystery schools, Knights Templar, the Illuminati, the Scottish Rite Freemasons. As their own history states, they are all direct descendants of Satan's first son, Cain, the first murderer, the first builder of Earth's ancient cities, which the idea was to pack them, stack them, and tax them, drive them off the country into the cities, control them. That really, with the first builder of the ancient cities, made Cain the first Freemason. The builders of the world are the Masons, as they are the builders of the world. Just look at the symbol of Freemasonry. It's made up of a compass and a square. A couple of tools essential for building buildings, building things. When the God of the King James Version of the Bible banished Cain from the area of Eden's east after killing Abel, he marked them so that nobody would be fooled by who he was, and that if they followed him, it would be because they knew full well who he was, openly worshiping a satanic entity, and also so that no one should harm him or his offspring for all time, and that they should be allowed to carry out their great work, as it's known, a 6,000-year quest so far, which ends up sometime in the very near future in the reign of the Antichrist, which is the first prophesied in Genesis 3, verses 15 and 16 of the King James Version of the Bible. Some of the earliest attempts to account for, trace this seed of Satan were books written which did extensive research, really, and genealogy on the descendants of Cain. The Cainites' Luciferian sun cult symbols also include the hexagram, the original seal of King Solomon, a triangle, and what is now known as the Cross of Lorraine, the double cross, a vertical line with two cross members, one underneath of the other. The Exxon logo has a couple of crosses of Lorraine in its logo. The 13th bloodline, the Merovingians, itself has been traced far back and east into ancient Egypt, ancient Samaria, and Persia, as well as Rome. This is important and makes a vital connection to to many because this sacred symbol, the all-seeing eye, above the pyramid, which is supposedly of Egyptian origin but goes back farther than that, is actually traced to ancient Sumeria, Britannia, and directly into one mythological island nation whose existence in the ancient Atlantic is entirely believed in the occult, once again proving to be the root source of all secret societies, the source of all magic, especially Druid magic, which is even being used on you and I today. Their true power source is connected in some way to Atlantis, the all-seeing eye, as well as the number 13 itself. And the last ascension step to the pyramid, represented on the back of the American dollar bill, representing the final move, the finality of the great work in its final stage, which is to place the sun-possessed king, the Antichrist, upon the world throne in Jerusalem. That would be the all-seeing eye coming down to tip the pyramid and reforming the pyramid, because it is a truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye capstone hovering above, waiting to settle down on it, as a spirit would settle down on a man, which is going to happen. Satan will possess the bloodline, the purest bloodline member of the Cain family, and he will be the Antichrist. With Satan, Lucifer, pushing his personality to the back and will completely take over the body, a possession. Yes, the finality of the great work, final stage, to place the sun-possessed king, the Antichrist, upon the world throne of Jerusalem. 13 also has unique connections to the number 666, the eye above the 13-stepped pyramid, symbolizing the Egyptian solar god Horus, the son of Osiris, lord of the underworld. Horus is the son of Satan. The eye actually represents the Antichrist to the occult world. In reality, the entire symbol itself on the back of the U.S. dollar symbolizes the satanic trinity with the divine couple: Father Osiris, Mother Isis, the parents of Horus, and the ultimate magical child. Today's Freemasonry believes that these are now, in fact, Satan, and it could possibly be Princess Diana, Prince William, and Prince Charles, making the eye belonging to the one king who is to rule all others. The magical child would be William. One of the most ancient concepts in religion is the divine couple. In Sumeria, it appeared as the earliest idea of the Trinity. God the Father was symbolized as the sun, the wife was symbolized as the moon or the earth, and the king was seen as their offspring, the son of the sun, a living representative of God on earth. Same idea as in the ancient Egyptian religion begun in Egypt, where the pharaoh was viewed as a living incarnation of Horus, the Immaculate Son conceived by Isis, the son of the divine couple, Isis and Osiris. The pharaoh was seen as both a god and as a mediator between the earthly and the divine. It was said that when he died, he ascended to the heavens and became Osiris, basically returning to the source in the mind of the Egyptians. And in a lot of traditions, the gods and goddesses who made up the divine couple are not seen as being separate or distinct entities, but just differing aspects of one another, or even emanations of one another. This is an even more ancient tradition. God is the primordial androgyny. The Greek word androgyny, andro, meaning man, jinn, meaning woman. Containing in the word woman, you have the word man also included. Womb and man together. Yes, this concept is part of many theologies, although the idea has been pretty much forgotten or maybe even ignored. Traces of it is even in Christianity. For instance, we're told that the name of Jehovah is made up of Hebrew characters representing the four elements: air, fire, earth, and water. But read slightly differently, the same characters spell he, she, and the word Elohim, usually translated as gods or the angels, is actually a composite of Elo, E-L-O-H, the feminine plural of God, and I am, Im, the masculine plural of God, Elohim. Even Christian sources concede that this, no doubt, is part of the ancient belief that God was of both sexes. Now you can see why in the world we're playing with sex the way that we do in 2016. Space. More next on Talk Radio, AM 640. It's ABFS. I'm the guy they call Space. This is ABFS. Talk Radio, AM 640. Like to communicate with me? I do it one way only. It's through email. 2 accounts. One, spaceman at 640toronto.com. The other, space at 640toronto.com. HW writes, I'm not sure if you know this, but this week, here in the UK, it became mandatory to get your dog microchipped. Now I see how it's going to be used the same way on humans. Anyone found with an unchipped dog in England now will be fined £500. Now, if you got 2 dogs, that's $1,000. Now, who can afford to be fined that much when they offer the chip for free? They say you'll never lose your dog and can always prove that the dog's yours. My, what an advent for human chipped children. Hey, people, do you want to know where your kids are at any time? Do you want to know what they're up to? If the answer is yes, then get your child chipped and always know where they are. Perhaps they'll make it mandatory to have your child chipped, or you get fined. Also, who can afford them fines these days? Signed HW. Emailing from the UK. How about this one? They have silver alerts here in North America, because the baby boomers are all getting quite elderly now, starting to, their mind slips. Mind goes. They go out for a walk and they don't come back. And they're thinking about, instead of having silver warnings or notations given out to the public, there's a senior missing. They call them silver hair. There's a senior missing. They give you the description. You're supposed to look for them. Maybe that's that person over there that you've been watching that doesn't really know what they're doing or where they're going. And it can all be solved. Well, the chip, I believe, would be the first where they would say, let's do the elderly and human beings first. The elderly and the children, as my emailer from the UK had been figuring. But one way or another, electronic identification etched into your body is coming. It's part of the plan. Yes. You see, the things that are happening today are getting more strange as we go down the road to digression. I don't call it progress, because we're not progressing at all. We're digressing. It's getting worse instead of it's getting better. In ancient cultures, the divine couple were seen symbolically as being the heavens and the earth. The God the Father and the earth representing the earth mother, the moon goddess. And together the two represented the most fundamental notion of generative power. In Mesopotamia, it's actually said and believed that there was, at a time in the history of the earth, in which the heavens and the earth were one. This primordial oneness, called Enki, gave birth to a son, Enlil. This son split the heavens and the earth apart, creating two separate entities from an original whole. You split the name Enki and you get two parts, and here's what happens in the legend. An, left to rule from the heavens, while Ki descended to earth to rule with her son Enlil. And so this describes the birth of the divine couple. It's the same story with the god Marduk. He's said to have created the heavens and the earth by killing Tiamat, the goddess representing the primeval waters. He cut her corpse in half, and one part became the heavens and the other the earth. Her eyes became the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that bordered Babylon. Now, this story dates from a later period than the Enki myth, and the symbolism is slightly different, but it still tells you that the idea of heaven and earth originally being as one was still believed. And although many other creation myths involving a divine couple seem to hint at this on purpose, most are a lot less specific in their detail. For instance, in Hindu mythology, Dayas Pitar, God the Father, and Prithvi were the original couple who brought the Vedic pantheon of gods into the world. They were said to have placed heaven and earth into conjunction with one another. In other myths involving the divine couple, their separation seems to be conveyed symbolically by the act of castration. The most well-known myth involving this aspect is the Freemason and ancient Egyptian religion of Isis and Osiris. In this story, Osiris is cut into pieces by the dark Set, who scatters 14 pieces far and wide. Isis goes about finding the pieces to sew them all back together again. She finds all but one. The penis, of course. In some versions, the penis has been thrown into the Nile, eaten by fish. But undaunted, she makes Osiris a penis out of a piece of gold, the color of the sun, attaches it, and instantly the god is resurrected. This tale is different than the earlier myths, and it doesn't represent the separation of the divine couple, but the idea of their reunification. The obelisks of ancient Egypt that are now seen all around the world in all the great cities of the globe are the symbols of that phallus that Isis made to represent the penis of Osiris, or the needle of Isis as it's called also. Either interpretation carries essentially the same symbolic meaning. In sewing together the pieces of Osiris, Isis is making him whole once more. The penis she fashions represents the point of union between the divine couple. And so that is where the symbolic significance to the ancients comes from. So the story conveys the idea, the power of the female element to restore the power of God by restoring the union of the two. Other instances of divine castrations are everywhere in the early creation myths, but none are hyped as much as the Illuminati belief of Isis and Osiris. But another example of castration dating from Middle Ages, connected to the Holy Grail, is the story of Percival, the Fisher King. Basically, the story goes like this. The Fisher King dies dying of a wound that never heals. But some versions of the Grail romance are vague as to how he gets this wound. But at least one is very specific. In a bizarre accident, the king has lost his genitals. A sword he's wielding breaks in two, and as it's falling to the earth, slices away his penis. It's said that the area between his legs was now smooth as a woman. And the king can only be redeemed by the Grail. And so the knight Percival sets out on a quest in search of it. But before Percival can hope to win the Grail, he must make a weapon to take along on his mystical journey. Taking the shattered pieces of the king's sword, he melts them down, forges the weapon over again, and sets off on his quest. This is all very interesting. The sword in question is no ordinary one, but a weapon that has legendary powers. It's said that it ordains victory and absolute power, but only to those destined to wield it. All others who try are destroyed. If you think about it, that very fact, that it shattered in the hands of the Fisher King, seems to indicate that he wasn't the rightful possessor to begin with. More on this Fisher King myth when I return on the other side of the break. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. This is AVFS on Space. I'm going to get a call Space. It's a view from space from Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. An influx into the inbox on the microchip since my first emailer. RG also writes, we also should be very careful to say that they should chip criminals, especially pedophiles. Then you know the next step. And there's this one from A in C, I'll call him this. I can recall seeing a movie called Zeitgeist. And at one part, they were interviewing a former friend of one of the Rockefellers. He said that the Rockefellers had mentioned how they were going to control the people, to have people microchipped. All it would take is a lure of convenience. People want to get a microchip because you can store your banking information on a microchip. Never have to worry about leaving your card at home or losing it or having someone steal it. He said Rockefeller was laughing about it because the people would want it. And when the powers that be want to eliminate you from society, they just turn off your microchip. You lose your identity and all of your value. The listener to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 thinks for his and herself, does not accept the quick little soundbite or the quick little one-paragraph news story and take us as gospel truth. You need more, and I know you do. And you know there's something wrong, but you may not know the whole entirety of the plan. But listening weekly, show by show, you start to build on what your knowledge is. And after a while, you're like me, you see the plan. See all the moves. Being, first, shot up the flagpole, getting everybody familiar with it, and then passing it into law. So, I want to get back to the Fisher King, the story of Percival, the Fisher King. Fisher King lies dying of a wound, never heals? A sword he was wielding in a battle breaks in two, slices away his penis. Parzival sets out on a quest in search of it. He takes the weapon that his king had, melts it down again and makes the sword hold again, forges the weapon again, and sets off on his quest. It's no ordinary sword, of course. It can only be wielded by the rightful possessor. And of course the king, the Fisher King, seems to indicate that he wasn't the rightful possessor to begin with. And the wound of the Fisher King is also very telling. The loss of his manhood indicates that he existed in a decadent, wounded state. It's like having a wound that never heals, exactly how it was described. The symbolism connected to Percival is also very telling. To win the Grail, he must first reforge the mythic sword and make it whole again. And this weapon obviously represents some sort of occult magic power, one both creative and destructive. Just like Lucifer can bless you or kill you. Its breaking in two was the basis of tragedy and ruin, but its reunification, the basis of attaining the Grail, with its shattering. And this is exactly what the king was, with both wounded and doomed. With its restoration, Percival won his quest and married the bearer of the Grail. I believe that's exactly the way the American Empire is going to go. Basis of tragedy, ruin, destruction, and its reunification with the rest of the world, the New World Order, the new empire, coming out of the old empire's smoke and ashes. Restoration. The quest is over for the Illuminati. And the bearer of the Grail, the Antichrist. The symbol is the story. It couldn't be more simpler. It's just like Osiris. The king is useless without the ability to come together with the queen and produce an heir to the throne. Another revealing part of that story, that myth, is that en route, on his quest, Percival must curse and reject God. He can only attain the Grail by becoming a god himself. This tells you that the very perception of God has become, for him, a hindrance, a roadblock that he must overcome before winning the Grail is even possible. I think Percival was meant to be a Templar Knight prototype. He must turn his back on being a servant of the true God, who in the course of his service to the king must reject religion. And the Fisher King, does he represent the satanic takeover of the church, the established authority on earth, possessed of a throne and attempting to wield a supreme power over all of men, but hopelessly incapable of doing that? Percival certainly seems to be everything the king is not. He's possessed of the capability of getting the Grail, marrying the Grail bearer, and not only wielding the legendary sword, but of making brand new. All of this would seem to indicate that the mystery of the Grail encompasses a lot more than what meets the eye. The very quest itself is a part of the process of redemption, transformation. And since the attainment of the Grail seems to be associated with marrying the bearer of the Grail, this symbolic union is more probably the goal of the Grail quest. The objects are just symbology. In other words, the true significance of this of this tale, and the coming together of the male and the female in a reflection of the original sacred idea, the divine couple. The end result of the myth is that when all of this quest is accomplished, the Fisher King's redemption is that he dies and Parsifal succeeds him. So, in fact, it's safe to say that the elements central to the story of the Grail bloodline also can be explained in the divine couple and the principle they signified. For instance, the Knights Templar, the poor knights of the Temple of Solomon, were totally linked to Solomon's Temple, with its Kabbalistic pillars of Joachim and Boaz. Occultists believed that these pillars represented the dual qualities of mildness and severity. One of the pillars was gold, the other green. The royal colors of the Merovingians happened to be the 13th bloodline, gold and green. Space, back and more on the other side of the break on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy they call Space. This is A View from Space on Talk Radio, AM 640. Like to communicate with me, I do it by email only, spaceman at 640toronto.com. One address, the other, space at 640toronto.com. AI writes, you mentioned the royal family a short while ago. I picked up a book some time ago by Prince Charles. It's called Harmony, A New Way of Looking at the World. I picked it up not because I'm a fan of the Prince of Wales, but because I was absolutely amazed at the esoteric-like religious and mystery knowledge Charles clearly displays to have in this book, and the references to certain mystery and esoteric themes and subjects, including sacred geometry, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, and ancient wisdom. Charles is clearly in the know with respect to ancient mysteries. When you're ranking that high in the bloodline are the Merovingians, oh yes, you must know that. You must. The Merovingians, again, their colors, gold and green. And they were the colors of the Boaz Joachim pillars and the Temple of Solomon, the Kabbalistic pillars, representing the dual qualities of mildness and severity, one gold, the other green. As I said, the Merovingians happen to be gold and green with their colors and refer symbolically to the principle embodied by those pillars of Solomon's Temple. So there's your esoteric knowledge. Because the Windsors and Buckingham Palace today, the crowned heads of the UK and the Commonwealths, are of the Merovingian bloodline. And in the ancient world, green in both cases also signifies the divine couple. Gold in the ancient world also symbolizes the sun, God the Father, and green would seem logical colors to symbolize the wife of God in her role as Earth Mother. And the roles of God and goddesses in ancient cultures seem to have been patterned after the classical parental model. God the Father was severe, distant, aloof. His wife was way more approachable, and in many ways seen as a mediator between God and man. And it's thought that except in rare or extreme cases, few people petitioned God directly in those times. Rather, they appealed to the female deity to intercede on their behalf. Just as any child knows his mother will naturally be more sensitive to his desires, while the father has a tendency to be more strict, less sensitive, authoritarian. A lot of people think this is the reason why there are few statues around of men as gods, but there's statues of goddesses absolutely everywhere. There's a sacred well in England, in a place called Glastonbury, said to have been visited by Jesus Christ and his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, who was said to have taken Jesus there as a boy. It's called Chalice Well. and it's covered by a large slab of stone, decorated with metalwork, showing strange intersecting circles, sacred geometry, a lot like the crop circles you've seen. Even Christians say that these circles signify the point of union between the visible realm and the invisible realm. But another object is in the design. The two circles are pierced by what has been said to be a bleeding lance, a symbol well known from the Grail legends, of course. Some speculate that this lance symbolizes the spear of Longinus that pierced the side of Christ when he was hanging on the cross at Golgotha, it being emblematic of the death and resurrection of the God. Being the instrument of Christ's destruction, it was therefore a key element of his resurrection. Now, when seen in conjunction with the two circles, this lance seems to assume a deeper level of meaning. Here it intersects and conjoins the dual worlds represented, which are spirit and matter, the spiritual and the physical, heaven and earth. Once again, we seem to see an echo of the same elemental idea already familiar to us. It's used in the same way that Aleister Crowley chose his drawing of the odd geometric shape around the chalice and dove that is associated with him. The drawing was a coded reiteration of the same theme. What has all this got to do with America? This country, America, was built from the beginning with a Merovingian blueprint to create a supernation out of it that would temporarily defend both Britain and Israel during her place in final events. And absolutely everything started with England and America and its own royal lineages, including the presidents and leaders, Bush, Windsor, Obama. Now, why are these sometimes unusually inept people seemingly granted the highest powers in the world? Because regardless of their own intelligences, they have the royal blue blood of Merovingian kings and the powers, placing them above us all who have an ultimate agenda. One of these men will be completely possessed by Satan once he achieves power with the New World Order. And this same man is enigmatically known to them as the One. The bloodline of 44 American presidents, counting Obama, who's related to King Edward I of England. There's 15 presidents from that bloodline, by the way. All the way from George Washington, all go back to European royal and aristocratic family bloodlines who have been interbred to keep the gene pool pure. Their genealogy, and that of today's key politicians, the banking heads, the business leaders, the media owners, continues back even further into the distant past through those European royal and noble Aryan families to the ancient kings of Sumer and its empire. Not least of all was Egypt. You see, throughout history, the right to rule has been decided by bloodline. For thousands of years, it's been done openly. Yet today, it's achieved through covert manipulation and the secret society web called the Illuminati, the children of the Matrix. The bloodlines are now all hidden, names changed to confuse. The Illuminati and its occult symbology, pointing to the hidden knowledge behind its magical origins, can be found in the most powerful nations on Earth. These being the modern Atlantic nations, Britain, America. In ancient times, they were Britannia, Egypt, Babylon, Sumer. With the addition of all the lies being propagated worldwide through the use of Jewish mysticism like the Kabbalah, the Zohar, the combining of the equally destructive witchcraft practiced by these people, all believe that the lost tribes of Israel are indeed Britain and America. The serpent-worshipping Illuminati has all the people and power in place to bring their Antichrist to power, who will soon appear to have all of the correct credentials to be called a world Messiah. The New World Order that will produce, after the cleansing or great purification, the killing floor they have planned, will certainly see Great Britain and Europe at the helm of world events. And as I've been saying for years now, the United States will have certainly been removed by that point to make way for the Antichrist. Britain, the mother country of modern Satanism, the British royal family and its societies have been involved with the occult for centuries. Scottish Rite Freemasons even refer to Queen Elizabeth II of England as one of their own satanic rites as the Queen of Babylon. Babylon being, of course, that spiritually called place in Revelation pointing out where the Antichrist comes from. That's found in Revelation 11, verse 8. For more information on satanic lineages with Britain, there's a detailed examination in the book called The Prince and the Paranormal, The Psychic Bloodline of the Royal Family. It's written by John Dale, published in 1987. The same book was banned outright by Queen Elizabeth herself. His work and others explicitly proves beyond all doubt that the British and Scottish royal families throughout the centuries have been not only participants, but playing a major role and actively involved with ancient societies like the Knights Templar, Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Tamar and the Order of the Garter, with a history going back way before the Crusades. I'm Space, returning with more on Talk Radio AM 640 following this break. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a view from space on Talk Radio AM 640. That's all it is. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Inundated tonight. Thank you so much for them. Many of them I can't get to yet to see what they say, but I just don't have the time during the short breaks. But I do see each and every one every week. Now, Britain, I believe, is the mother country of modern Satanism. For more information on satanic lineages within Britain, there's this great book, The Prince and the Paranormal, The Psychic Bloodline of the Royal Family by John Dale, as I was saying. Banned outright by Queen Elizabeth herself. Now, the secret societies of Britain and America control and protect Israel and its future fascist king, who is the coming Antichrist. They have control, well hidden, within British intelligence, MI5, MI6, the American CIA, the NSA, and even within the Israeli Mossad itself. It's these four, MI6, MI5, CIA, and the Mossad, along with others, who have been systematically used as a major vehicle for the satanic hierarchy working behind the secret veil to control world events through their many assassinations, their many sabotages, and their terrorist attacks. Merovingian dynastic history was once only thought by most researchers to be the history of France. But now, many, like Sir Lawrence Gardner and other royal genealogists, revealing its previously hidden connections into Scotland, and right now with the children of Diana, Princess Diana. For centuries, Merovingians and its lost king was central to the marriages of all French and English kings. And it's still that way today. And there's much more going on here than even most historians will ever realize. The marriage to Princess Diana was so extremely important because Diana brought back one aspect of the Merovingian bloodline back into the English crown. Greatest among the princesses' forefathers were the Stuart kings in her lineage. Charles II, James II. In marrying Prince Charles, Princess Diana had given this bloodline over to the royal family in England. And what's more, her son, Prince William, the firstborn, claims the blue-blooded lineage from every British king who has ever lived, Protestant and Catholic, because the Stuart kings were all the Catholics, all the Catholic kings in British history, royal history, which Charles' family did not possess. Now, it's in the heir and the spare, Prince William and Prince Harry. I believe the royal bloodline of Cain and the false throne of David have taken control. The Cainites, the race of the malevolent beings that have existed in the earth since the dawn of this present age, and their father is literally said to be Satan, the very one who corrupted and had intercourse with Eve. That's the truth behind the apple allegory. Even one of the Illuminati companies has that as its symbol. The apple even shows the bite taken out of it. How blatant can that be? And it's a falling apple as the fall of man. What holds the apple onto the tree is its stem, and the stem has been separated in the logo of the company Apple. Signify its fall. As the Bible even states, as well as the angelic war that is raging, this action then sets up a war between two distinct races of beings on the earth, those of Satan and those of the true God. As the true God makes a blessing to counter the curse. Eve is said 9 months later to give birth to a son, Cain, which means, I have gotten him. It is also stated in the original text that she continued in birth and begat Abel, strongly implying that these two were twins, fraternal twins, meaning having two different fathers. And it is possible to have twins fertilized by sperm from two different partners. It's pretty rare, but possible even today. Say, for instance, a woman has sex with two different men within 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 days. Both eggs are fertilized. The other types of twins are called identical twins and are always from the same egg and sperm. Again, rare maybe, but remember what's stated in Genesis chapter 3. Here's the quote. And God said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? What is that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me. And the Lord God said to the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. He said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. Thy desire shall only be to thy husband. Genesis 3:11. 3:11, if you're not familiar with Bible scriptures, is the train bombings, Madrid, Spain. I have many police officers who listen to ABFS, Talk Radio AM 640. And right now saying to themselves, 311 is a 3-digit police code for indecent exposure. Exactly what happened to the Garden of Eden. Notice the way the Bible abruptly segues from cursing Satan and his seed, then turning immediately to Eve and cursing her with pain and childbirth, as if to make the connection between Satan's seed and Eve's impregnation and child born from their sexual union. When Eve finally brought her firstborn to term, she said with excitement, "God has given me a man-son." But it has been theorized by some that she knowingly lied with those words because Adam was present at the birth, and she knowingly lied. Eve knew Cain was not from Adam. The birth of Cain set in motion Satan's bloodline on the earth, he being the first serpent, reptilian, human hybrid born. That's why hybrids, you see, today are exalted around the world. If it's a hybrid, it's cool. Satan, with Eve, begat the first human hybrid. Part God, part man, part reptilian, part human. Being part of Satan's own blood lineage, and this cursed bloodline was basically established on the earth through ISIS into the Roman Empire and all the way up through the ages to today. Now let me draw your attention to the Microsoft billboard ads that were in the subway system, the TELUS ads on TV. They all propagated reptilian blood imaging in their ads. Microsoft wants the people in the posters have heads of reptilians, remember? While the TELUS ads used green chameleons, got an English accent also. Geico was doing the same thing with a green reptile with a British accent. Geico, the insurance company. Now, back to the Garden of Eden. Eve then gives birth to Abel, meaning the favored of God of Adam's lineage, the other father. From this, it was clear these two distinct lineages would always war with one another until one side was completely annihilated. The sun worshippers versus the moon worshippers. The union of the snake. Looking back at Genesis 3:15 and the war of the two races, Abel was to be the true heir to God's promise from which a Redeemer Messiah was to come through his bloodline and restore everything as it was before, the curse of man's ruin. Listen carefully now. This is what is meant by her seed will crush your seed. From the beginning, Abel's lineage, God's lineage, was to originally produce the Christ, while Cain's, Satan's lineage, was to produce the Antichrist. Satan, knowing well the meaning of the prophecy made in Genesis 3:15 and 16, needed to try and derail this plan of this God in order to break God's word and finally claim victory in his ancient war. And so, took over the mind of his son Cain, the first son of perdition, and caused him to murder Abel. Spaceman, it's Talk Radio, AM 640. More right after this. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a View from Space and Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to space at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Got some information you'd like to pass along? got a critique of the show, just like to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS from on Talk Radio AM 640, feel free. So let me just go over Genesis 3:15 and 16. Satan, knowing the meaning of the prophecy made in that part of the Bible, needed to try and derail the plan of the God of the King James Version of the Bible in order to break God's word and finally claim victory in his ancient war, and so took over the mind of his son Cain, the first son of perdition, and caused him to murder Abel. You could say that Cain was really the first mind control victim ever. Satan taking over his mind. Satan believing with Abel dead that this would break God's own word, which would in turn break the power of God, which would then allow his seed to continue and take over the earth and gain total victory. But again, as Genesis makes known, King James Version of the Bible, even after death, Abel's blood cried out to the Lord. Once again, Satan had won a battle over the true God in his temptation of early man. First with the lust in attacking Eve, then with the murder of Abel at the hands of Cain, and so a definite pattern was formed throughout the rest of the history. Yet even with every destruction of God's original creation, with Abel's death, Cain's victory, the God of the King James Version of the Bible banishing him far from where Adam and Eve had settled, removing him, meaning a substitute, the gift. Seth then replaced Abel and carried out the final hope, the bloodline of God's original promise. Cain, being cast out after killing Abel, was left to wander the land of Nod, was given a mark called perdition upon him, so that no man could kill either him or any of his descendants from doing what they must. Reminiscent of Jesus telling Jesus, the son of perdition, go out and do what you got to do. Go out and do what you must. God, knowing the final conflict must take place, and therefore Cain and his descendants serve their purpose, all relating back to the words in Genesis 3:15. Cain traveled the ancient and cursed world, where he later found a wife, his dark Eve. The symbol of their cities has always been a towering white obelisk or pyramid, the gold sun disk, the silver serpent. The symbols of their clans were symbolized by the pentagram, hexagram, the rose, the blue apple, or red equal-sided crosses on a white background, the Maltese cross. Their first child was named Enoch, meaning the learned one. And it's from this point where Cain's Enochians quickly multiplied further into 13 various tribes, which branched out from their chief city, named after Cain's son, located in ancient Persia, which is now Iran. Watch out in the Bible, there are 2 Enochs. The earliest of the family tribes of Cain multiplied and conquered many of the ancient nations in the Asiatic Near East, and they migrated. They kept on moving. Over the following centuries, certain branches of their nomads had already spread through the Mideast from Persia all the way to southern Egypt, even reaching as far as the Caucasus and the Carpathian Mountains, and further went to the land of Canaan, assimilating themselves among the first of its inhabitants, who were known as the Canaanites, Cain's family. While all this was still happening, the King James Version of the Bible, God had created his tribes who had descended from Seth, Abraham, Moses, Joshua among them, leading them and their generation into the land of the Canaanites, where they were to completely possess the land which God of the King James Version of the Bible had given them for an eternal possession, it was said. This, of course, meant war between the race of half men, half gods, Cain's family, the Cainites, and the ones that descended from Seth. This, of course, put them at odds with one another. So, the God of the King James Version sent his Seth against Satan's Cain, as if in some cosmic chess match, of which God later had nearly every Canaanite killed and removed from this extremely ancient and already contested land. These victorious Hebrew tribes and their strong armies later became Israel, God chosen through which the Messiah would later come through, one of their family bloodlines. This is what the King James Version of the Bible contends. Cain's descendants, losing their epic battles to the overpowering descendants of Seth, were forced north into the Caucasus, into the Carpathians, where they settled among their ancient brethren called Keltoi, later migrating en masse further west even, eventually coming to Western Europe, killing off any and all native peoples on their way, stealing land, building cities, over the ashes everywhere they went. A small remnant never left Canaan, but stayed there, hidden, as if waiting for an event, maybe even revenge. The western migrating tribes then filtered into Europe, settling out to conquer the nations with their newly formed iron weapons against bronze, constantly moving west as if being led by some ancient force toward the Atlantic, leaving behind them their unmistakable and barbaric trail of blood and murder. Does Conan the Barbarian come to mind here at all? And who played that role? Why, it was none other than the lineage of Cain, Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was just his biggest role, I believe. Yes, at the time of Christ, some scholars have them as literally descending from their homes in Canaan with their secret lineage to become Jewish priests, known as the Pharisees, who were in control in directing the religions of the Jews at that time. This is still being debated and unclear, but one thing is certain. Jesus Christ always set himself in complete opposition to these Pharisees, despite the power over life and death and secret connection they held with Rome. In addition to this, Christ never addressed them as the Pharisees or teachers, as a person would have called an elder at that time with all respect. He instead labeled them as the generation of vipers, snakes, adders, brood of evil serpents, even in one instance calling them the children of Satan, stating their father is the devil and he was a murderer from the beginning and that they know only to do his will. For 40 years after the crucifixion was Rome's complete destruction of Israel in 70 A.D. Seth's lineage, then blamed for what the lineage of Cain did, which was their killing of God's only one and true Messiah. And what happened? They were wrongly destroyed and scattered amongst the nations for 1,850 plus years. The same angry curse which Jews were always threatened with in times past for worshiping other gods. This was known as the greatest peril to the Jewish people in history. So far, needless to say, Europe was not kind to the scattered Jews during those 1,850 years either. Cainites were now in every position of power in the ancient world, and after centuries of interbreeding while in Eastern Europe, their occult bloodlines, carefully placed in positions of power, greatly increased their territories, their strength, their status, the intrigue over the former rulers whom they killed, eventually leading them to ascend Europe's ancient thrones, the royal heads of Europe, the royal houses. In early European lore, these names took on near mythic attributes and were seen as having less godlike than monstrous qualities, and were even later said to be the brood from which arose the vampires of legend. In still more ancient texts, it's Cain himself who is known as the first vampire, a tradition that was certainly handed down through the most powerful of elitist societies. Yet this same tradition is most often found in satanic books. They were notorious in the ancient world for their extreme strength and murderous cruelty. The Cainites were perceived by fearful Europeans and its former Slavic houses of nobility as gods of their own right, divine with an innate and dark nature, ever thirsty for blood. I'm the Spaceman. More next on Talk Radio, AM 640, as we trace the bloodline. I'm the guy to call space. It's a view from space on Talk Radio, AM 640. Final segment, tonight's show. Wherever world power was rising, Satan had his children placed there, always ready to take the highest positions of power and influence over its people. Still true today. They were to be secretly ruled by societies of the purest blood. That's a clue for you in the book of Revelation at the time of Rome, Revelation 17, verses 17 and 18, when Pergamos then became Satan's seat of power. Revelation 2, verses 12-13. During this time, their own arcane secret societies equally grew in status, number, and world authority, later taking in among them even those who were not of Cain's bloodline. Anybody accepted as evil can enter their ranks, yet they were sworn to keep their secret, always pushed on by the quest for the Holy Grail and the lies behind it. Not long after this are the first accounts seen in world conspiracy brewing to those forced to watch, like today's incarnation referred to as reptilians surfacing. Then were the very first horrific tales of bloodthirsty monsters ruling the world. The family of Cain learned to hide their satanic natures well as Europe's most elite and noble. But the truth is, it still got out as the common people began to hear stories of the occult betraying their family roots to Satan. Some of these tales actually were turned into children's stories, believe it or not, into adult myths, or even into what we call today fairy tales, which always serve a couple of purposes. One, truth, and one for the deflection of truth after Satan's greatest lie. The lie that he cannot harm anyone or anything if he doesn't exist. As the legend and lineage of Seth were thrown out of Zion like Lucifer, they also wandered medieval Europe like Cain's lineage did. Cainites, seeing their own curse, followed after them. The new plan to destroy Seth and his descendants took a couple of main paths. One was total destruction and murder of Jewish people, and the other was more ruthless, as it was a plot to make Jews hated in all nations and cause those nations to then also persecute and kill Seth's bloodline. Cain's tribes already held power in Europe and used the alchemical technique of transmutation by getting rid of their given names, taking names of Jews for themselves, for instance. One archetypal form of alchemy was to turn lead into gold. And in doing this, they continued their global conspiracy to bring about their Antichrist, the son of Satan, who would oppose the Son of God, the Christ King at his return. This frees them to set their evil plans in motion openly, under new Jewish-sounding names with a reason, the implication of which makes it appear that Jews are the children of Satan, and they, and not they, the true progenitors of the evil. This removed from history the increasing knowledge about them and their works by placing their evil upon the chosen race of God to better destroy the remnant of Israel. Yet none of these things of Satan ever happened without King James Version of the Bible's God warning of it. It was Canaanites who later became the much farmed group of people, first seeds, first city builders, the first bankers of the Middle Ages, which only brought problems with the people. And many thought they were the children of the devil, never realizing the two clear distinctions between the Canaanite bloodline and the bloodline of Seth, because this ignorance is the root of all anti-Semitism, even today. See, as time went on, Cain's bloodline found a more effective way to destroy the lineage of Seth by having others do the destroying for them. And with that, their new migration was underway. So many people over so many centuries have fell into the same trap of hating the Jewish people while never being aware that there's really an entire parallel race that exists of demonic-led beings who know evil being descended from that first evil, who are calling themselves, even presenting themselves as Jews, but are not. World War II is a perfect example in history where you can clearly see the hand of the black nobility. This actually is why many are still confused as to why the supposed Jewish bankers of Europe financed Hitler's evil ends, knowing the overwhelming hatred he held. In other words, why would Jews want to kill Jews? Now you know. Those were never Jewish bankers. They're Jews who are not Jews. Same's true today. Even when it seems the names of the conspirators have all the evidence pointing to them being Jewish, but are not. Yes, these serpents are now attaching themselves to the royal house of David. For over 3,000 years, this royal house of the dragon has destroyed untold millions of the lineage of Seth through war, through captivity, through all kinds of destruction. They've also paved the way by trickery at the UN that they control, which gave them the state of Israel, allowing their so-called safe return for an even more disastrous future purpose. Going back to the end of the true beginning, you arrive at the legend of Atlantis, the lost continent. With its own mystery, you find some very interesting answers as to why the Merovingian kings truly represent Lucifer. God's first light ruled over an earth that was once perfect, from a place that had been called by certain occultists to be Maru, Atlantis. And it was Lucifer, going by the names Hara, Pharaon, and Ra, later mythicized as Atlas, the first king of Atlantis, relying from a glorious white pyramid is where he lived. A pyramid of light, the Devil's Triangle. All of this, the Illuminati want to return to the golden age of Atlantis. This has been A View from Space. This is Talk Radio. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm out.